So for those that don't know me, my name is Anthony Sena. Oftentimes I am called Sena or Anthony. Either's fine. I'm not offended by either, and I've answered that a few times for folks in the community, so I just wanted to make sure folks were aware. So thanks for having me today. Get onto the slides here. So I'm going to provide a quick update and overview on Strategus. I'm going to talk a little bit about running the OHDSI sample study and requests we have for OHDSI sites around that. And then finally, I'll close today's presentation with how to design your network study using Strategus and HADES. So to start, one of the most basic questions I get is just, how do you pronounce Strategus? Because we've said it a bunch of different ways over the years. And so the official pronunciation, according to Webster, is Strategus. And the word Strategus means a leader of an ancient Greek army. And in our context within OHDSI, Strategus is an R package for coordinating and executing analytics using the OHDSI HADES modules. And shout out to all of the OHDSI collaborators who maintain and improve our OHDSI HADES packages and make it possible for us to do all of these network studies that we've been talking about so far in 2025. So just a quick update on the Strategus package itself. So Strategus was officially added to HADES back in October of 2024, and it continues to improve based on user feedback and community contributions. And I specifically wanted to call out some work that's been done by Martin to include the treatment patterns package into Strategus, as well as AIC, who has developed the PLP validation module. And also wanted to shout out John Gresh and the Chiron cohort, who have been doing some work to review and provide feedback on the Strategus repo template. So many thanks to all of those collaborators. So at a high level, Strategus is providing us with standardized ways of defining the inputs for a study, executing it, and reviewing the output. So to kind of take that step by step. So for the standardized input, we develop a JSON document, which we'll refer to as an analysis specification that captures all of the design elements and choices for the study. So this would encompass things like the phenotypes that were developed for Phenotype February and the various HADES analytical package and choices that go into running the study. Once we've defined the inputs, we can move towards execution, and Strategus is providing basically a standardized pipeline for running all of the HADES packages themselves based on that standardized input that was developed in the previous step. And I'll touch upon how we use RENV for reproducibility. All of the output that is generated through running Strategus and all of the HADES packages is outputted to comma-separated value files or CSV files, which provide us with transparency for all of the results that are generated. And I should also mention that all of the output is aggregate summary statistics and not any patient level data. Okay, so Strategus, I don't necessarily love the general or military analogy, so I like to think of Strategus as the vehicle that gets us from study inputs to output. And so the way in which that works is we can combine HADES modules or HADES packages into various study designs, and those study designs are captured as an analysis specification JSON document. And so we could think about combining the various HADES packages, like combining Lego bricks, where we might want to perform a large-scale cohort incidence as we did in the How Often study, and that would involve the cohort generator package and the cohort incidence package. Extending that out, if we wanted to build predictive models using a similar structure, we could just simply lock in the PLP package and do that task as well. I know a number of folks within the community have wanted to make use of the treatment patterns package for their respective studies, and so that is now supported and shown here. And finally, the sample study that we'll go through today is actually going to use nearly all of the HADES modules that are in Strategus to essentially run characterization, estimation, and prediction. So when we talk about the standardized execution and the pipeline that Strategus provides, we're making use of a package that's maintained by the RStudio community called RENV. And if you're familiar with Python, it's roughly equivalent to the VENV package. So it's a way to declare what are the R packages that are used in a specific study. And it provides a reproducible way to download and install all of the packages. And so when we use the standardized inputs in the analysis specification JSON, coupled with the RENV lock file and the RENV package, it provides us with a reproducible, standardized execution environment for running OHDSI studies using HADES. Finally, once you've run Strategus and all of the HADES modules, the output is produced in CSV format for transparency. You can use your favorite CSV editor to review the results. And Strategus also provides functions for loading these results into a results database. In addition, HADES includes an OHDSI Shiny Results Viewer, which provides a way to view the standardized output as executed through Strategus. So there's a couple of scenarios in which you might use Strategus to run your study. And so I'm going to kind of like build this up based on kind of like the most simple example and then work up to what we do for our OHDSI network study. So in this scenario, you can imagine that there's a single OHDSI site with one OMOP CDM. And so from the left here, they've standardized their data to the OMOP common data model. And here in this box, we have our study code, which would include Strategus and HADES, and the analysis specification for the study itself. Someone at that site would execute the study code, and from that, a set of aggregate result CSV files are produced. From there, you could load those results into a PostgreSQL results database and use the OHDSI Shiny Results Viewer to view those results. And I'll also call out that this results database is different from the OMOP CDM in so much that the OMOP CDM supports many different database platforms, whereas the results database is strictly in PostgreSQL. If we extend this example out where we have, again, a single OHDSI site with multiple OMOP CDMs, the process is very similar, whereby you have your study code executed against your two CDMs in this case. Aggregate results are produced for each CDM, and those aggregate results are loaded into a results database. If your study involved estimation, you would then run the evidence synthesis module against your results database to produce the meta-analysis for the estimates produced. And again, you can use the results viewer to then review those results in-house. So now taking it up a notch, we go to an OHDSI network study example where we would imagine two sites. In the first site, we have two OMOP CDMs. And again, that process is similar to what I just described, whereby the study code is executed, aggregate results are produced, and at site 2, a similar story where aggregate results are produced. In this case, when we are running an OHDSI network study, those study site participants will send their information over a secure FTP, and then the study coordinator will upload those results to a results database. Once all of the results have been collected, we will run evidence synthesis if the study involves estimation, and then we will host the results viewer on results.ohdsi.org. Okay, so next up, I'm going to talk through and provide a demo of how you would run the OHDSI sample study. So this is a new sample study that was developed and designed based on information from the OHDSI Evidence Network. And the idea here is that we wanted a study that was capable of running across the network and providing, I wouldn't say meaningful results, but results that would allow us to kind of pressure test the CDM itself that you have at your site, as well as to gather some information about the drugs that are used. And this particular sample study uses ACE inhibitors versus diuretics amongst hypertensive patients for the outcomes of acute myocardial infarction and angioedema from the time period of 2020 through 2024. And so what we're asking all of the sites to do as part of Analysis April is to run the sample study on their OMOP CDM. And very explicitly, we're not looking for the results, but rather a verification that the study executed at your site and that you're kind of ready to go for running all of the upcoming network studies. And so as part of getting set up to run this test, I just want to make sure that folks are aware that you need to make sure that you've installed your R environment and have that configured. The current HADES standard for R is version 4.4, and also recommended are all of these other, not recommended, also required are these other components, which includes the R tools stack, R Studio, and the Java development kit. And another call out that I wanted to make here is just to make sure that you've set up your GitHub personal access token, which is described and detailed on the site. Reason being is that a number of the packages that we use within the Strategus and HADES modules are hosted on GitHub, whereas many others are hosted on CRAN, which is a different place to host our packages. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the process of downloading the Strategus template, which is where the sample study is, and how to go about executing that. So let me switch over to my demo machine. All right. So to start, you'll find the repository or the Strategus study repo template on the github.com/OHDSI Studies site. And you'll see that the repo template that we're going to use is pinned to the top, so it's not hard to miss. And clicking in here will bring up the code that we'll want to download and make use of. So there's a couple of ways in which you could download this code. If you are using Git and want to use Git, you can copy this URL and clone the repository. The way I'm going to kind of demo this is you can actually just download this entire repository as a zip file. So if I click on this, it'll start the download process for me. And once that's done, I can go to the file system where I've downloaded the zip file. I can unzip it. And within here, you'll have all of the files from the repository. And so what I want to do is open up the R project file, which I can do by double clicking on it, but I've already opened it here. And the first thing that you'll want to do when you open this up is restore the RENV environment. And so the way that that's done is by running the command RENV restore. And there are a large number of packages in the lock file, so this can take some time to work. I've kind of done this as a cooking show example where I've already installed most of the packages, except for a couple here that I just wanted to kind of illustrate how this would work. And so you can see here that the following packages need an update, the characterization package, as well as Strategus itself. So if I confirm that I want to proceed, those packages will be downloaded from CRAN or GitHub and installed into my project. So we'll give that a moment to run. All right, we'll give it more than a moment to run. While that is chugging away, I'm going to move on to the next step, which is to open up the Strategus code to run, which is how you will execute the sample study. Okay, so it looks like that completed, thankfully. Okay, so I should also point out that there are instructions on how to do this, which I will link in the slides and in the chat. But the code to run file is essentially where you will configure the things that you would need to specify for your environment. So just kind of walking through this code from the top down. The first couple of pieces are just setting environment variables, so you shouldn't change any of that. But where you see this note about the start of the inputs, this is where you're going to want to start to specify things like where is your CDM database schema. So it might be something like CDM underscore patient level data. Your work database schema is where you would have access to write tables, specifically where you would want to store your cohort tables themselves. So this would be something like my work schema. You can specify where you would like those CSV files to be written. So right now that this defaults to the current working directory for the project and creates a results subfolder. And from there, you can specify the name of your database, which in this case, like we we use Eunomia for testing, and I'm going to use that as part of like illustrating how you would run the sample study, but you would want to use a database name that's meaningful for your organization. This at the moment, or at this point, this specific setting is really just used to create a subfolder off of the results. In the event that you had multiple CDMs, you'd want to use different database names to store those results. The minimum cell count is used to censor data that's below or at or below this particular value. So you'll want to use whatever is appropriate for the privacy restrictions at your site. And then finally, the cohort table name is what you'll want to use to maybe uniquely identify the people that are in your study. So if I were to update this to something more descriptive, I could say instead of sample study, this might be like ACE inhibitor sample study. But the cohort table name is simply used to create those tables in your work database schema. The next part that you'll want to change is on lines 30 through 35. These are currently commented out, but you'll want to uncomment these and then create the connection details for your CDM. And so you'll want to change these values from these environment variables that are here to something that is applicable to your environment. So if you're using PostgreSQL, I would use that value for the DBMS. The connection string might be something like JDBC, : Postgres, and I can never remember connection strings, so that's where LLMs become very helpful. But let's just say it's on my local host for now. I can store the username securely through environment variables or keyring. Keyring is no longer required with Strategus, if you might remember that far back, but you could put in your username and password here. And so the next thing you'll want to do is just comment out this bit for Eunomia. This is how we test this particular script. And you can then uncomment out this bit if you want to just highlight this and test your database connection. And this is a good thing to do to just verify that you got all of that right before you go off and run the remainder of the script to execute the study. Okay, so next up, the analysis specifications are loaded from the inst sample study folder. And this is our sample study that we are asking the community to run to just verify that everything is in good working order with Strategus and the HADES packages themselves. The execution settings you will not need to change. Those are going to be based on the values that you entered above. This little bit of code, just make sure that the results folder exists, and it'll save out these execution settings to the file system for reference. And then finally, we execute Strategus, which will then run the study itself. So let me just put back some of these things, and I can show you how this might run against Eunomia. All right, and this does take some time to run even on the synthetic data of Eunomia, so I will switch over to a different RStudio session to kind of show you what the final result of running this looks like. And so what you'll get once you've run through, successfully run through the sample study is you will get an execution summary from Strategus showing you how long it took to execute each one of the modules. And you can see here that we have a combination of characterization modules, estimation modules, and prediction modules. And so hopefully when you run this at your site, you see all green check marks to verify that everything has completed. And at that point, you can review the CSV files if you like. So those are found in the results directory of the template. So if I were to go in here, you should see the database name that you specified in the script we just reviewed. And underneath that, you'll see two folders. One is the output and one is the work. The work folder, you need to be careful with this one because it will contain patient level data, and this is not what we share when we exchange results for the study. Instead, we focus on the output folder. Within the output folder, you're going to have a folder per module, and within that, you'll have the CSV files that have the results for your specific study results. So at this point, you'll want to verify that these results are proper. And the way that you could do that is open each file and go through them. but it can be a little hard to know how all of these pieces fit together. And so right now I'm looking at the CG cohort count CSV, and it has a few columns: database ID, the cohort IDs, and then the counts for the subjects. And so one way that you might learn what these files are actually, what they actually contain, is to go to the Strategus help, which is linked off of, github.com/odyssey/Strategus. On the top right here, there's a link for the documentation for the package itself. And under the package documentation, we have this results model documentation. The results model documentation has a list of all of the results tables and their descriptions and the columns involved. So if you wanted to look for the, what's this file called? The CG cohort count table, I can find that in the list. I can open it up and get a description of the columns themselves, the expected relationships amongst the other results tables. So as you can see here, we have a relationship between the cohort counts that relates it back to the database that it came from, as well as the actual cohort definition that was used to produce those counts. So it's a nice reference as you're going through those results to verify that everything looks proper. With the sample study, we're kind of asking folks to just get to this point, let us know that it worked, and stop there. But we will be to basically just make sure that this worked, and then you don't need to share the results, but I'll talk about how that would work in the next section. So let me switch back to the slides. So as you go through that process at your site, if you do run into any issues, there's a couple of ways in which you can get in touch with us to get some support. You can email the evidence network at odyssey.org email. You can also email me directly at sena@odyssey.org. You can also post issues to the Strategus study repo template issue tracker, as well as if you want to attend the Odyssey Evidence Network office hours. Those are held on Fridays from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And this link here provides documentation around the process that I just demoed, so you have a reference to that. Okay, so next up, let's talk a little bit about how you would design your network study with Strategus and HADES. And as covered in the first edition of the Book of Odyssey, there are elements of an open Odyssey network study that include making all of your documentation, study code, and subsequent results publicly available on the Odyssey GitHub. Of course, we want investigators to create and publish a study protocol detailing the scope and intent of the analysis. And in this step, we're going to talk a little bit how investigators can create a study package, or a study project in our case, that will allow the study to be CDM compliant. So I'm going to walk through how we would use the study repo template that we were just looking at to do exactly, to create your network study package. So if I come back over to my demo machine and I come back over to our study repo template, the very top of this repository, you can use this template to create a new repository. And so when we do this for our Odyssey network studies, an administrator would do this step for you. But if you wanted to have a go at this and create it under your own personal repository, you could actually do something like test Strategus study, give it some description, and then I can create the repository. And what this will do is it'll actually copy over all of the contents that you just saw in that repository. So it's giving you a place to start. So you really don't need to start from scratch with any of this. You can basically take this template and start to tailor it to your specific study needs. And as you'll see here, this was created in my personal repository, and it also provides linkage back to the Odyssey Studies repo. So I'm going to go back to this and kind of use it to walk through some of the additional steps you would take as you're going through setting up your network study. So the first part would actually be to update this README file so that it conforms to the structure that we want for OHDSI network studies. So an example of that is the semaglutide study that was done recently by Cindy Kai. And so you'll see that in the README, it provides a title for the study itself and some other metadata that describe the study use case and other things. And so that would be kind of the place to start with respect to just getting this specific part of your repository set up. Within the template itself, we provide documentation on how to actually use this template, which I'm going to walk through and kind of demonstrate as we go. And so when we're using this study repo template, there are kind of two roles that we have in mind. The first is that there's the project author or the study designer, and that's kind of the role I'm going to take on for this portion of the demo. The project author or the study designer is the person that's going to be responsible for assembling all of those Lego blocks that you saw earlier and designing the study and getting it ready for all of the study participants in the network. The template itself also talks about the site participant, which is someone who is going to participate in executing the study, and it's going to kind of follow the demo I just provided where you're downloading the code and executing it on your CDM. I also provided a link to one of the videos that was part of our 2023 Save Our Sisyphus Challenge that Mark Chouchard put together. It provides a really nice overview of how to get things set up and to get your repository going. So I would highly recommend you take a look at that as you start your network study itself. So within this template, as I mentioned, it's basically a way to just get started. And so it's organized in such a way where we've put a lot of the resources that you would need under this inst folder. So specifically like the analysis specification that we have for our sample study is here, along with some other resources around the cohorts that were used and the negative control outcomes. And so these, again, are just here for reference. The expectation is that you would remove these as you've developed your own study and kind of remove some of these placeholders over time. The rest of this documentation covers some of what I've already talked about in terms of setting up your execution environment, establishing your project using RENV restore, and so on. So when we get to the point of actually designing your study, kind of the first step in that process is to download your cohorts or to assemble the cohorts that you have for your study. And we provide a script here to download cohorts from Atlas, but you could very well get those in a number of different ways, including from the phenotype library. And so I'll just show you what the download cohort script looks like. And I can actually run this for reference. But in this specific example, these cohorts are being downloaded from our Atlas demo instance, and it was downloading some cohorts that were used to test out the Eunomia data set. So it's just grabbing 3 cohorts from the web API. It's giving them different identifiers and names, and then it is saving those files into the repository, into the code base so that they are referenceable later. And so for your studies, you would obviously want to change these and assemble them however you see fit, but it is recommended to store those cohort definitions in your repository for reference itself. And these definitions will also be included in your analysis specification later. So once we have those cohorts assembled and downloaded, we want to move on to actually creating the analysis specification itself. And so there are a number of ways in which you can create the analysis specifications for your study. And within the repository, we provide a couple of exemplar scripts that are used essentially to create those sample studies that we just looked at or just ran. And so within the repository, there is a create Strategus analysis specification R script. There is also documentation on the Strategus repository that talks specifically about how to create the analysis specification document. And so to just kind of give you a look at that, it talks a bit about how to assemble the HADES modules, and I'll show you some of the code that is used to do that. And it goes through each module and how to create the settings for them. In addition, underneath the documentation, we also have references to the HADES modules themselves. So you can see here there are a number of CDM HADES modules that directly correspond to a HADES package. And so if you were looking for more information, say on the cohort incidence package, you can find a link to it here and review the documentation that's provided. So there's some documentation around how the methods work, some of the terminology that's involved, and the cohort incidence package in this case provides some nice examples of how to configure the package and run various different variations of incidence rate analyses. So I'm not going to go too far into the details of how to, how to go and configure each one of these modules. I will call out though that next week we have a session on the treatment patterns module or the treatment patterns package, which would play directly into creating these analysis specifications. And then in 2 weeks, there is another session on estimation and prediction best practices, which will go into more detail around these settings and how to configure them for your specific study. But I do want to take a quick minute to kind of show you what the create analysis specification script looks like, and maybe talk a little bit about how Strategus is providing these lightweight module wrappers around the various HADES packages. So just in case you're not familiar with this, RStudio provides this outline documentation. So as long as your code is formatted in such a way you can actually have like bookmarks to different sections of the document itself. So I find this very handy if I wanted to look at, what were the cohort diagnostics modules settings that were used. I can jump quickly to that section. And within here, what you're seeing is that this cohort diagnostics module is, this is actually a reference to the Strategus package itself. I can create this module settings. Oh, I have to load up the script, sorry. Let me start from the very top. So this particular script is organized in such a way where we've tried to put all of the inputs at the very top. So these would be things like the time at risk settings that we want to use for our incidence rate and estimation portions or analyses, the patient level prediction time at risks, the study start and end dates if they're applicable. And then from here down, this is stuff that we would say like you can look, but maybe don't touch unless you know what you're doing. And so in this section, we're loading up various the cohorts, the negative controls, and the outcomes of interest for this specific study. Just ignore that for now. But for now that that is loaded, I should be able to load up the cohort diagnostics module and create the specifications, which allow me to specify which cohort IDs I would like to run through cohort diagnostics and the various diagnostics that I might want to run to evaluate those cohorts. Same goes for the other modules. Essentially, you are creating a module for the specific HADES package that you want to introduce into your analysis and create the settings based on the HADES package itself. At the very end of this script, where we create the analysis specification, this is where you can start to tailor and put together those Lego bricks to meet the needs of your specific study. So if your study were maybe just performing characterization, you could remove or comment out like these subsequent sections that reference the cohort method module and the self-controlled case series module and the PLP module. And so in this way, it makes these settings very modular, and you can basically take this script, organize it how you see fit. But ultimately, what you want to do is create this analysis specification and save it into your study repository so that it's captured as all of the specifications, and you can then use that to execute the study itself. So I know I'm going through that quickly, and I'll try and check on the chat when there are questions. So apologies if I'm missing that. So once the analysis specifications are created, you can move on to executing the study, which is what we just covered earlier. And once you've executed the study, you're at a point in which you can start to work with the results themselves. And so, as I mentioned earlier, you would want to store those results, in a Postgres database. And we provide some scripts that are used to essentially set up the tables that would hold your results. This is the create results data model.r file. We have another script that you would use to upload those results into your Postgres database. And then the app.r is providing a Shiny results viewer, which will then connect to your results schema and allow you to view those results in the Shiny results viewer itself. And if your study involves estimation, there is an evidence synthesis R script in the code base for generating the meta-analysis and storing that in the same result schema mentioned above. So maybe I'll just walk through those quickly. So the create results data model script here basically will reference your analysis specification to figure out which tables to create in the results database itself. Your results database schema should be specified at the very top. Generally speaking, if you are using a managed service, you may have a database administrator that's going to provide you with a schema for your study results, and so you would specify that schema name here. You then provide the connection details to your database instance, and you can then use Strategus to create the results data model as shown below. Once the data model is created, you can then upload those results using the upload results script. Similar to the previous script, you would specify the results database schema. You would load up your analysis specification. You would provide the details of how to connect to your results database. And the script would essentially loop through the results that are in the results subfolder from your project and upload those to the database. And finally, the app.r is named so that you could actually just run this directly from RStudio. And again, here you would make some edits where you would specify the results database schema and the connection to your results database. Additionally, similar to the way that Strategus works, the Shiny app builder will actually allow you to specify which modules you would want to use to display the results. So if your study didn't include prediction or estimation, you could simply just remove those, and then calling this last bit will actually launch the Shiny app to connect to your database and view the results. And so I think covers everything I wanted to say. I just wanted to maybe call out to some of these future calls since I referenced them. So next week we got the treatment patterns call. The following week is the estimation and prediction. And I hope I'm not stealing Craig's thunder here because I think he's probably going to talk about this too. But since I mentioned evidence synthesis, it's also on May 6th. And if you're interested in a bit of a technical deep dive on the HADES modules inside of Strategus, I'm going to cover that as part of DevCon 2025. So I hope to join you there, and I'll stop presenting and turn it back over to Craig. See if there's any questions.
Sena, I'm going to just jump in. Thank you for going through that. There was a lot of material that you went through, and you got through a lot for a lot of users in a lot of different ways. I'm going to try to simplify because we've got so many different types of study participants on the call, just to see if I can summarize briefly what certain people should take out of this. So first is, if you are a data partner, meaning you're a person who has data converted to the OMOP common data model, the main takeaway that you should have taken from this is, if you want to be able to run OHDSI studies, run the test package. You don't need to know how to design a test package or design a study or anything. You just need to be able to run the code. And Miguel asked the question on the chat that was an important one, which is like, what are we looking to have you achieve? It's simply that the code runs without error. If you get to the end where it says done, you win. If you want to tell us that you got to that point just to brag about it, you totally should, because that's a good accomplishment. And if you run and you hit an error, then Sena shared the various points of contact with the evidence network, with the evidence office hours. You can reach out to Sena. But as a data partner, if you're not looking to design a study, you just want to be able to participate in the study, the thing to take away from here is the way that Strategus works is that somebody will provide an input specification for analysis. And Eric, to your question in the chat here, like the JSON expression is a fully contained definition of the whole study. So somebody has to produce that, but that's not something that every person in the study does. That's something that one person in the study does. If you're a data partner, what you're going to do is you're just going to take that file, which is just a JSON file that's just got free text in it. You're going to input it to your JSON into the Strategus code, which you've configured. And out the other end is just going to come a series of CSV files that, as Sena showed, you could look at them yourself. You could do fancy things like open it up in R-Shiny if you wanted to yourself. But like literally, you're basically taking a text file in, and you're going to get a series of text files out. And as long as you've done this configuration step of making the software run, then we are very confident that a new JSON file will be able to pass in, and you'll get CSVs in the output. And that's like, so for a data partner, that's your immediate ask. Sena, before I go to the other user, does that seem like a reasonable summary for what you're asking for the data partners?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I covered a lot there, so I should have either led with that or closed with that, but that is absolutely what we're looking for. And just to kind of add to that, we've had a number of folks that have successfully run the test package, and we're just looking for more confirmation that folks can kind of walk through those steps. And that's where I'm happy to provide support and use the office hours to do that as well.
Very good. And then to Cindy's question here, now I'm talking to a different chunk of you. So if you're out there and you're interested in doing a study, meaning you want to design an analysis, basically your job is going to be write one of these JSON files. And so that step that Sena just walked through in terms of how does creating a JSON analysis specification work, that's the kind of activity that we would do. So Cindy and to the other guideline-driven evidence study leads, we'll want to work with you on producing those analysis specifications. Now, the technical work there is basically we have an R script that works pretty well as like a general template for creating these JSON analysis specifications. And for many studies, if you're doing just a very vanilla study, following the OHDSI mantra about things, if you just have a target, a comparator, an indication, an outcome, the point of this R script is going to be it'll produce a JSON that just kind of works out of the box to run any of these modules that you're going to choose. If you're doing a study that isn't following the standard rubric of target, comparator, indication, outcome, then there may be things you want to change in that R script. But the bottom line is you're going to have a little bit of R code, and it's going to produce a JSON file. That JSON file is something that we can verify is going to work. And then all the network study is going to entail is data partners will get your JSON file and run it. Sena, in terms of the next steps for Cindy and the other guideline-driven evidence study leads, how do you want to proceed with helping with the design aspects there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, I'm happy to assist. I don't know if we have a forum for that, but I think we had talked about using the evidence network meetings as a way to maybe get that started for folks that want to get moving on it. Also happy to just set up ad hoc meetings as we need to.
Very good. Okay. And as you were highlighting there, the reason we've got special sessions dedicated to treatment patterns, to estimation, to prediction is because there we're going to spend more time talking about what exactly are those input parameters to each of these analysis modules so that you guys can be thinking about those. But we've gone through many iterations of this over the last several years to try to make the analysis network studies easier. It's still not straightforward in terms of doing everything, but the whole point here is we're trying to break it into smaller pieces. So bottom line is if you're somebody who wants to run a network study, you've got an idea of a question in your mind, your task now is get to a JSON file. And if you're a data partner and you want to participate in studies, your job is going to be grab a JSON file and run it in your environment and share back the results. And then the last bit that you highlighted, Sena, just to summarize, is you mentioned about the evidence synthesis task. And that's basically going to be if somebody is part of a team is the coordinator of a study, meaning they are compiling the results from across the network, then once those results have been compiled, they can be uploaded into one place. So for example, in OHDSI, we have a Postgres box that we let lots of network studies put their results up there. Once the results have been uploaded into a Postgres database, that allows us to do two things. One, we can run the evidence synthesis module, which just allows us to do meta-analysis. And two, it means we can actually distribute the results through our Shiny server, which is basically just a Shiny app that's pointing to the Postgres database. And that's something you could run locally if you wanted to, but also like if you're a data partner and you don't want to stand up a Postgres web server and all that kind of stuff, you can actually just share the results to a central coordinator who would put the results into a Postgres database and spin up our Shiny app. And that's the collaborative environment that we host as the coordinating center that Lee Evans does a good job of maintaining for all of us to do these network studies. So for the guideline-driven evidence studies, if I use Cindy as the example, Cindy, your task will be produce a JSON. Miguel, your task will be run Cindy's JSON. And then whoever Cindy designates as her coordinator, that person's task will be upload Miguel's results into the Postgres and stand up an R Shiny app. And that's basically the way that we'll be handing the pieces to each other to do these network studies.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I'm still catching up on the chat a little bit here, so I'll do my best to respond to those after the call.
Looks like Cynthia has a question. Do you want to just, since we have a couple minutes left, just ask it?
Oh, yeah. So I've seen studies where there's a graphic that looks at the balance between two cohorts. Is that part of this pipeline where you get to see that? Because like maybe different data partners, where the code is written, maybe the cohorts are not balanced?
Yeah, that specific plot that you're thinking of is coming out of the cohort method package. And so it would be part of running an estimation pipeline task, specifically cohort method.
Okay.
Yeah, so the big thing here, Cynthia, to think about is all the Odyssey tools that you're familiar with, they all run inside of Strategus. So think of Strategus just as the way for us to stitch all the pieces together. This by itself isn't doing anything new or different from what you've seen from all of our standard Odyssey tools and best practices. It's just a way for us to make it so that hopefully it's a little bit easier for study designers to create an input and data partners to execute that input and produce the results in a standardized place. And instead of having a lot of different apps to do a lot of different types of analyses, we're trying to create like one standard workflow that we can use no matter whether you're doing an estimation study about a safety of a drug, or you're doing a prediction of a certain outcome, or you're characterizing a treatment pattern of a disease. All of those will follow this exact same approach through all of the process.
Thanks.
We have one question just in the chat and then one hand raised. So Sangho, you want to ask your question and then maybe somebody can respond in the chat to Eric's question?
I'm just curious, how is the regulation of this studies from the community could be used as could be commercialized, not commercialized, but could industry partners be submitting or creating the JSON files and potentially take advantage of some of the network capabilities, or that is something to be, or it's only for academic use right now?
Yeah, I'll chime in, Sena, to answer that. Thank you, Sangho.
Please.
So what we're trying to do as an open science community is enable the technology and the analytics to do this for everybody, for all stakeholders. Now, if you're representing industry and you want to do a study and get data partners, there may be a non-technical part about that, which is like, how are you going to incentivize a data partner to participate in your study? For example, you may pay them to execute the study in exchange for the results. So as an Odyssey coordinating center, what we're doing is we're providing the technical infrastructure to allow for the open exchange of those designs and the sharing of results in our environment. What we're not specifically doing is and of course, Claire's done a great job of presenting how we're using the Odyssey Evidence Network as a way to connect people who have research questions to people who have data who might want to participate in research. Where we're staying out of it is if you're going to put some sort of contract in place with between an industry partner and a data partner, that's kind of your business and between you all. And we want to be able to encourage those types of connections to happen, and where possible, hope that those connections can can help with the further sustainability of the OHDSI community. But really, in terms of scope of here, nothing you saw here is out of bounds for any of you, all of you, whether you're industry, academia, government, whatever, for thinking about this as the framework that you should be using to design and execute network studies.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Claire?
Claire, yeah.
Yeah, just to add on to that. So the industry working group is thinking about this in particular, how we can start to integrate industry with the evidence network partners. And like Patrick said, how are we going to be incentivizing data partners to potentially, work with an industry partner? There is an industry study-a-thon. I'm going to put the link to the chat. That's going to be happening in I forget the actual day. I think it's in, do you remember, Craig, when it is? I think it's
May 29th and 30th.
Thank you. I had the link, but not the date. So we are going to be kind of exploring how we might do a study for an industry partner in that study-a-thon. But then also we're going to be continuing to work with the industry working group to understand how to marry the two together.
I mean, if you think about it, as long as there is a framework and as long as there is some kind of catalog or a kind of a way to figure out where we can find what we're looking for, I mean, the rest should be fairly simple. But thank you very much for your input, and also yours, Patrick.